3 years. That's how long Team Rocket went missing after the events of Pokemon Fire Red and Pokemon Leaf Green. The team was officially disbanded after Giovanni, their leader, suffered defeat multiple times at the hands of the trainer Red. Remnants of Team Rocket, who were still operating on the Sevi Islands, also suffered defeat by the hands of Red, and Team Rocket ceased operation in Kanto for good. Now, instead of chaos and crime from the once powerful Team Rocket, there was radio silence. However, 3 years later, 4 high-ranking executives of Team Rocket sought to rebuild Team Rocket and restore it to its former glory. This takes us to the events of Pokemon Heart Gold and Pokemon Soul Silver, where we face off against Team Rocket one more time. Team Rocket is just one of many villainous teams that we see in the Pokemon franchise. Villainous teams have been a staple of the Pokemon franchise, occurring in these games as often, or if not more often, than Pikachu and the Pokemon League itself. These villainous teams are evil organizations who seek various different goals, ranging from just attaining wealth to achieving world domination or even recreating the universe in their own image. These teams try to achieve these goals through various dubious and criminal methods. They serve as the main antagonist of each of their respective Pokemon games, and all of them vary in quality, some being very good, having good aura, a good plot around them, and others not so much. Hi, I'm Flyboy, and this is actually part 2 of my series going over each of the villainous teams of the Pokemon games and judging which one truly is the best. In this series, I seek to determine the quality of each of the various villainous teams you run into in the Pokemon franchise. I'll be ranking each of these teams on 4 unique metrics, those being motive, villainy, plot, and aura, which I'll go into a little bit more detail with later in the video. After which, the team will be placed on a tier list, so we can truly compare and see which team in the Pokemon franchise is the best and which one is the worst, and every single one in between. These episodes also serve as a deep dive and almost a kind of retrospective on each of these evil teams. Now, like I said, this is the second part of my series on these villainous teams, so if you want to watch the first episode before you watch this one, which goes over the brilliance of Giovanni and Team Rocket and the Kanto region, make sure to just hit that tag up in the top right corner, or I'll leave a link in the description below. But without further ado, I think it's time for us to introduce Team Rocket one more time. This new Team Rocket that I talked about the intro in this video serves as the main antagonist of the Generation 2 Pokemon games, Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, and their 4th generation remakes, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This new Team Rocket seems to be a hodgepodge of old and new Team Rocket members sort of just thrown together. They are primarily seeking to find Giovanni and return him to his station of power at the head of Team Rocket. The primary motivation of Team Rocket in Kanto, or the one that came first, was achieving wealth and influence and domination in the region. And that motivation is still there. However, it more serves as a means to get Giovanni back, rather than the main primary focus of this team. As for the leadership of this new Team Rocket, I regret to inform you that Giovanni does not make a return. Spoiler alert, he does not come back. However, there are new leaders. Instead, this new Team Rocket is spearheaded by 4 unique in their design, executives. These executives are Proton, Petrol, Ariana, and the last being Archer. He is sort of the interim head or boss of Team Rocket, filling in the shoes of Giovanni. So let's go over each of these admins. Proton is a pretty standard and basic Rocket executive. He doesn't stand out too much. However, it seems he is kind of a pretty boy and has his fans amongst the female grunts. But besides that, he's not too interesting and he doesn't offer too much to the plot, or the narrative, or really anything. Petrol is probably the most interesting and unique of the 4 Rocket admins added to this game. He has the ability to disguise himself, which sort of feeds into that heritage that Team Rocket has of intrigue and deception. He also seems to have a little bit of a soft side for the main protagonist, which we'll go into later. Ariana, the next admin, is kind of like Proton in the way she's kind of basic and doesn't really stand out much. Her unique traits, though, however, is that she is a hot woman. So, I mean, give her some credit. That is something. And she also has this sort of admiration for the main protagonist, which we'll also get into. Now, what's crazy is Archer, the last one, the head honcho, the boss. also seems to be the least interesting of these four, if you can believe it, after Proton and Ariana. I wish I had a lot more to say about him, but he really only has like a dozen lines in this game, and you only interact with him once. While they go under the same moniker and have the same exact uniforms as the last Team Rocket, they are very different and unique in both their leadership and their motivations. Now, let's go over the plot summary of Team Rocket and their attempted resurrection in the Johto region. A tale of desperation and the dying breath of the once all-powerful Team Rocket. Naturally, I'll be using dialogue and gameplay from the Generation 4 remakes Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. They came out about 10 years after the originals, and they feel like a more fleshed out and complete product. Furthermore, the executives I just went over, those four unique ones, Proton, Petrel, Ariana, and Archer, they weren't even in the original Generation 2 games. They were just nameless executives. Alright, but with that out of the way, let's get started. The first time you hear about Team Rocket is actually in the Violet City Pokemon Center, where a gentleman tells you that Team Rocket disbanded about 3 years ago. This is very interesting because it sort of lays out the time frame for you in these games. It lets you know that it's about 3 years after when you last defeated Giovanni in the Kanto games. Now, we don't know if they disbanded for sure, it's still hearsay, but it will be confirmed in your next interaction. Now, this next interaction isn't too far from the first, as it's in Azalea Town, right after you defeat the first gym leader Faulkner. Just as you're about to enter Azalea Town, right in front of the Slowpoke well, you see a Team Rocket grunt arguing with a random stranger. He is upset about the idea of Team Rocket disbanding. However, he does admit that it's true. But he does say Team Rocket's back, and then he assaults the man. Immediately, we see that this Team Rocket is a lot more aggressive and violent than the last. While one of the grunts in Celadon City did threaten you in the past, it never reached actual violence against humans like it did here. So what this does is it sort of shows Team Rocket reeking of this desperation. They're almost like a cornered animal, and I mean, they don't have their leader. Giovanni's missing. So this is a great premise. The concept that they're building here, that Team Rocket is this desperate, almost feral animal, is perfect. After you enter Azalea Town, you find out that the Slowpoke that usually reside in that town are now missing, and Kurt, the Pokeball maker in the town, leaves for Slowpoke Well, assuming that Team Rocket had something to do with it. As you fight through Slowpoke Well and the grunts there, you actually uncover a lot of information that adds to this premise that I talked about earlier. You figure out from the first Team Rocket grunt that they are poaching and selling Slowpoke tails, that they're cutting off of the Slowpoke. From the next, they say these are orders from a higher up at Team Rocket. Giovanni's not mentioned. And the last is the most striking. It seems as if a Team Rocket grunt is lamenting the fact that Team Rocket is sort of stooping to this low in their pursuit of money by poaching Slowpoke tails. You finally run into Proton at the end of the well, and this is the first time we interact with one of these new admins, and he talks up this big bravado, but the grunts leading up to him sort of undermine this false sense of confidence he gives off. What we find from this first interaction is this Team Rocket, at least conceptually, seems to be desperate and aggressive, leaning into these aggressive tendencies and low-life, pathetic money-making schemes. When you leave the town, Silver runs into you and brings up Team Rocket and talks about them a little bit. This sort of alludes to his connection, a very unique connection he has to the team later on. Later, you see a Team Rocket grunt just standing in front of the Goldenrod radio tower, which just serves as a way to foreshadow their climactic event that happens at the end of the game. The next encounter with Team Rocket is in Ecruteak City, and it's just a lone Team Rocket grunt dancing in the theater, like just being a nuisance. And so what you sort of feel, this sort of aggressive, desperate team, they're kind of now just looking disorganized and losery. I hate to say it, but this next interaction sort of knocks them down a peg from what we expect from them. It is after this moment where you realize Team Rocket almost has no presence in this game, because you can go on to face the 4th gym leader, the 5th gym leader, and the 6th gym leader without even running into one Team Rocket grunt. However, the storyline with Team Rocket finally picks up again at Mahogany Town. You hear rumors of a rampaging red Gyarados in the Lake of Rage, which is just north of the town. And in the town itself, you find this very suspicious souvenir shop. I think this is actually awesome. It's sort of like a callback to the game corner in the original games, where it's like, there's nothing to see here, nothing suspicious going on here. which obviously there's a Team Rocket base hidden underneath, but you don't know that yet, technically. When you go north from Mahogany Town to Lake of Rage, you go through this gate where there are these Team Rocket grunts who are charging $1,000 to cross through as a toll. And so you see that Team Rocket really is resorting to these sort of scams to make money. Once you defeat or capture the Red Gyarados in the Lake of Rage, you finally meet Lance, who, as you remember from last time in the Kanto games, was the 4th member of the Elite Four. And he will be, I want to say, assisting you in taking down Team Rocket, but he kind of mollywops them himself with his Dragonite, and you'll see that. Because as you return to Mahogany Town, Lance literally uses Hyper Beam on one of the storefront workers and uncovers the secret base underneath the most unsuspicious, least suspecting souvenir shop of all time. Upon entering this Team Rocket headquarters, you find these Persian statues, which sort of act as security cameras. And what happens is when you walk in front of them, 2 Team Rocket grunts fight you. And if you go and run in front of more than one, you find out it's the same 2 grunts running back and forth, healing their Pokemon. That's it, just 2 grunts as their first line of security. Furthermore, you find out that this Team Rocket hideout is a repurposed ninja hideout. These 2 pieces of information further cement the idea that this Team Rocket does not have the wealth the old Team Rocket once had. When you take into consideration the Team Rocket grunts sort of lamenting the Slowpoke well poaching, and then the Team Rocket grunts at the gate charging tolls for the Red Gyarados, now we see they're repurposing hideouts, unlike the old Rocket who were building their own. So we really do see that this Team Rocket does not have the money or the status the previous one had. You battle through the headquarters, and you finally run into Petrol, who is disguising himself as Giovanni. Apparently his disguise is pretty poor because the trainer character calls him out, and he uncovers himself. However, I think this is very interesting, and actually adds more to Giovanni's character in the previous games, because if you, the trainer, know what Giovanni sounds like, what he looks like, it shows that this Giovanni was a very popular person, probably on TV. That could just be something they threw in to relate to you, but I don't know, it's a really cool addition. You defeat Petrol, and he tells you that it's no use because you need his voice to unlock the room, which is powering a radio tower, which is forcing Pokemon to evolve, such as the Magikarp in the Lake of Rage to evolve into that Gyarados, through radio waves. But the plot must continue. Isn't that how it always is in these Pokemon games? So there's actually a Murkrow in the room who mimics his voice and says the password for you. Now, before you storm this radio room, this generator room, I guess, you do have to face Ariana, the next admin. You fight alongside Lance and take her down, and afterwards she says how good of an admin you, the trainer, would be. Now, it does show that Ariana has a respect for the trainer, but let's not forget, you're still 10 years old. This shows uncertainty in Team Rocket itself in these games, because although you and Red are both 10 years old, Giovanni never once even suggested that you could be part of his operation. He always called you a child. He always talked down to you as if you were a child. Ariana, on the other hand, sees you as an equal. So that's just something else I sort of noticed with this new Rocket team. You charge into the generator room, which is powering this radio, and you destroy the electrode powering it, and it's done. You leave the building, but before you do, you run into Silver one more time. However, it seems Silver's very absent from the heat of the battle, from taking down Team Rocket itself, seeming disinterested in even fighting with them. This dynamic you see between you, the protagonist, and Silver, where you both are against Team Rocket per se, but you're more actively involved, reminds me of something the Apostle Paul said. In Ephesians 5:11, he writes that we should have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. And while you and Silver both dislike Team Rocket, and for good reason, and we'll find out for Silver, there is a very deep reason why he opposes them, it's interesting that he's not as involved in exposing them. Often in Pokemon, the rival character will have the same goals as the protagonist, but will have a different way of achieving them. And I want to go deeper into the rivals of Pokemon in another video, but for here, I think it just shows how important that last part of that verse is. that it's not just enough to not associate with evil or Team Rocket, it is our job to directly oppose evil. And so a lot of the times when I go a little bit deeper into these games, people go, it's just a kid's game, it's just a kid's game. But I think this game does a really good job at showing you, if you are a child playing this game, just how important it is to actively expose evil. And that's what you do here with Team Rocket. Remember, we are just about to face the 7th gym leader, and there's only been 2 major altercations with Team Rocket up to this point. Let me remind you, in the Kanto games, before the 7th gym leader, you already completed the Silphco mission. Now, right after you defeat the 7th gym leader, you get a call from Professor Elm, and he tells you that there's some weird stuff going on the radio, and Team Rocket could be a part of that. You head over to Goldenrod City, and you see that the whole town is overrun by Team Rocket grunts. And this is awesome because it's very reminiscent of the Saffron City takeover, and it sort of brings back that old Team Rocket swagger they once had. To enter the radio tower, which Team Rocket did take over in the hopes to call for Giovanni and have him return, you must dress up like a Team Rocket grunt. And I think this is a really cool addition to the game. I wish they did a little bit more with it, but the dialogue with all the NPCs in the town changes from before and after you put on the uniform. I think it's just a really cool touch. However, once you get into the radio tower, Silver immediately takes your clothes off. Sus, but hey, I mean, I guess they don't want you looking like Team Rocket while you're fighting Team Rocket in the climactic battle, I guess. You slaughter countless Rattatas and Coughings as you make your way up to the top of the tower to find the director. On the way up, you also find a Proton fangirl, which I think is a pretty cool touch. Add some character, We love any drop of characterization these executives get, Once you get to the top, you find the director, but no, it's actually Petrel. He fooled you again. He fooled you twice, okay? And, there's this old saying in Tennessee. So you fight Petrel, and his team is ridiculous, okay? His team is 5 identical Coughings, and then a Wheezing, which has a nearly identical moveset as the 5 identical Coughings. I wish I was joking, but that's literally what it is. Petrel gives you the basement key to where they're actually hiding the director who can give you access to the radio room. And he says he does this because he's a nice guy, and it sort of shows he has this sort of soft spot for the protagonist. But while I like that, and it would work in, I guess a normal Team Rocket setting, kind of like a Colress role in Black and White 2, it doesn't really work here because the rest of the admins are also equally, pathetic and just unserious. When would Giovanni do this for you? I genuinely can't see him doing this. So you slaughter more Rattatas and Coughings and so forth until you finally find the real director who gives you the actual key to get you into the radio tower. On a side note, this is actually a slog compared to Silphco and Fire Red and Leaf Green, so make that with what you will. You finally start ascending the actual radio tower to stop it, and really what it just is a boss rush of the last of the 3 admins you haven't fought yet in this altercation. First Proton, then Ariana, who again says you would be a great executive, which, like I said, I don't really like this. It kind of makes it look unserious. And then finally, you run into the big boss. For the first time, by the way, I told you this is the climax. This is the end. This is the big moment. This is the first time you meet the head honcho, Archer. You fight him, and his team has a Houndour and a Coughing. Not very threatening, if you ask me. And this is your first time seeing him for real. I think he doesn't even have a name drop before this point. So there's not really a lot of lasting power to this guy, especially when compared to Giovanni. You finally defeat Archer, and he says he'll do as Giovanni does and disbands Team Rocket right then and there. Now, I kind of want to say, keep Giovanni's name out of your mouth, Archer. You don't know what you're talking about. But, hey, I guess they wanted to draw a parallel here. These games are technically sequels, and so they're sort of playing into the same trope. But, yeah, that's it. That's the story in Heart Gold Soul Silver. But wait. There is more. There are 2 other events after this that you get in Heart Gold Soul Silver. One is in Kanto, and the other is a event hidden behind a Celebi event. It's like a storyline that's hidden behind a Celebi event. Don't you love when Game Freak does that? But the first run-in with Team Rocket again is in Kanto. There's this illiterate grunt who stole a part to the power plant which is preventing the magnet train between Saffron City and Goldenrod City from working. And this kind of builds a little bit more aura for Team Rocket. Their operation on the radio tower was technically like multi-region, and I assume they were getting rid of the magnet train to stop like Kanto law enforcement from getting involved. So I actually like that they not only attempted to stop Kanto from getting involved, but they succeeded. When you finally fight this grunt, he only has like a level 32 Golbat. It's kind of sad that the last breath of Team Rocket and Johto is just one of their grunts. But, you know, it's kind of fitting too, so whatever. However, like I said, there is a special sort of side episode that happens if you acquire an event Celebi in these games. Basically, the Celebi takes you back in time and shows you a conversation between Giovanni and Silver. So remember, I was alluding to this connection that Silver had with Team Rocket? Well, we find out, and it's canonized. In a way, I would say it's canonized. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be. Of Giovanni being confirmed to be Silver's dad. And like most Pokemon fathers, he is an absent one, probably building that resentment that Silver has for Team Rocket. Fire Red and Leaf Green did allude to this connection with Silver. I think one of the scientists on Five Islands said that Giovanni's son has red hair, but this essentially confirms it. Now, this Celebi event is kind of like a two-parter. In this first one, you're just sort of an observer of this conversation between Giovanni and his son, Silver. The other part is you go back in time to fight Giovanni. And this fight takes place in Tojo Falls. And it's kind of like this weird time loop thing, because this takes place when you're also in the Goldenrod Tower taking down Team Rocket. Except Giovanni gets the call from the radio and is like, haha, I will return once more. And then boom, you fight him and you stop him at the same time as you're fighting and stopping. So it's like a weird time loop thing. If you ask me for my personal opinion on this, I feel like this is a little out of character for Giovanni. At the end of Fire Red and Leaf Green, it's kind of obvious he's done with Team Rocket. It's not like Team Rocket was, you know, completely done for at that point. He called him off while they were doing pretty well. They just attempted their biggest heist ever. And now he's turning back and wants to start it over again. I don't know. It doesn't really seem fitting. And with the whole time loop stuff, I don't know. For me, it doesn't seem very convincing as something that's canon. But you know what? If, you know, it got you to fight Giovanni in these new games, and it gave us a cool little sprite of Giovanni, so I'm not going to complain. Regardless, whether Giovanni returns or not is set in stone. He doesn't. Why he doesn't, whether he chooses not to or you defeat him, I will just leave that up to interpretation. And that concludes the largely underwhelming and lackluster story of Team Rocket and Johto. It starts off very strong and has a good premise, sort of a good concept, but it kind of falls flat on its face. But we'll get into that when we do our review on Team Rocket and Johto. Like I said earlier, these videos not only serve as a deep dive and a retrospective on these teams, but also as a review of these teams, where we determine the quality of them. I will be doing this by judging them based on 4 unique metrics and giving them a score between bad, mid, great, and excellent for each of them. These metrics are, first, motive. What motivates these evil teams to do what they do? Is it compelling? Do the crimes that they commit match up with the motive? If there are world-changing motives, universe-altering motives, do they have universe-altering crimes? Obviously, if there's higher stakes, I want to see higher levels of crime committed. Next is villainy. As the name suggests of these teams, villainous teams, I expect these teams to be villainous. Are the actions of these teams actually villainous, or are they kind of just like misguided fools that you could write off and just be like, oh, they don't know what they're doing, man. They don't know. They're just misguided. They have poor education. If you gave them more, see, the difference is a good villainous team is just evil because they're evil. They have their goals and they want to achieve them. If you can sort of write them off and say they're just misguided, probably not a good villainous team. Next is plot. How well integrated are these villainous teams in their respective game stories? Is your interactions with these teams spaced well through the game? Are they kind of front-loaded, back-loaded? Maybe they're sparsed all the way through, but is the pacing good? Furthermore, do they present a compelling narrative? Is there sort of a moral dilemma presented? Is there some sort of thought-provoking action or ideal they push? Or, you know, a good story is also one with a good villain. Do they present themselves as a good antagonist? And finally, we have aura. This is the X factor. A lot of this comes down to my personal opinion, but hey, you know what? This is my show, so my opinion's gonna be involved. And this will include a lot of factors, you know, their aura in general, are they cool? But also their fashion, their presentation, and this sort of just ties it all together. This is sort of just my personal twist on this rating system. So without further ado, let's get started with how I rate Team Rocket in Johto. The motivation of Team Rocket in Johto sort of follows where they left off in Kanto. They are pursuing wealth, and we really see that in the Slowpoke well. However, it sort of takes a backseat to their ambition to bring Giovanni back. And so Giovanni taking his throne, you could say, of Team Rocket is their primary motive in these games. This motive does make sense. However, it does come off a little unconvincing when you see how official Giovanni's disbandment of Team Rocket was in Fire Red and Leaf Green. And so Team Rocket and Johto, they sort of come off as a sort of LARP of Team Rocket. They're basing everything on a hope that Giovanni will see this team and want to take his throne back. However, if you consider the Celebi event to be canon, then Giovanni did hear their radio and did want to come back. So that makes their motivation better. It makes it more compelling. Giovanni, there is a precedent there that he wants to come back. However, regardless, I think when you put it all together, their motivation a lot carries over from Kanto, which I thought was a really good motivation. And the motivation to get Giovanni back is sort of a 50-50, depending on whether you truly believe he wanted to come back or not. It sort of just feels like this false hope. But regardless, I think I'm going to give Team Rocket and Johto a great score for their motive. It's not perfect, but you know, it's compelling, it's convincing, it's not terrible. Next is Villainy. These guys initially come off as even more sinister and evil than the Team Rocket that came before them. Your first impression of Team Rocket at the Slowpoke well was one of their grunts assaulting someone, something you really don't see in the original Kanto games. Furthermore, they were poaching Slowpoke tails, which seemed low even for them, as one of the grunts kind of alludes to. However, as the game goes on, you find them a little less serious than what they first put off. You have a random grunt dancing in Ecruteak City. You know, you have a radio tower, the ability to evolve Pokemon, and it's only used once, like for that single Magikarp. And furthermore, the admins are constantly bending the knee to you and paying their respects to you, something that Giovanni never does. And I expect a true villain to never really pay their respects in the way that Ariana and Petrel do. This new system they build to evolve Pokemon by radio waves, they only use for one Gyarados. It doesn't seem to go any further than that. They don't use it to affect trainers' Pokemon, you know, and it doesn't seem like they're using their powers and their abilities to commit evil to their fullest extent. If I'm being honest, this team really does start off strong. They come off very sinister, very evil, but as time goes on, they feel more and more like a corporation, almost. I mean, you have the 4 admins, you have sort of a managerial class up top rather than the sole Giovanni, and these admins are paying their respects to you. So they aren't as serious about it. Giovanni never, ever would suggest making you part of Team Rocket, especially a leader in Team Rocket, yet Ariana says it twice. And finally, the radio tower takeover, which, to be fair, was pretty awesome. You know, I would definitely say it's comparable to Silphco, at least the scope of it, and holding the director hostage is very similar to what happened with Mr. Fuji. It just, Archer gives up in that moment. Archer gives up at almost any wind of opposition, and so while the scope is there, it's almost like that sort of cockroach feel you got from Team Rocket, where they never die, wasn't quite there. So I hate to say it, but I think I'm going to have to give Team Rocket and Johto a mid ranking for their villainy. They start off very strong, and it's very compelling, this sort of concept of an aggressive, desperate Team Rocket and it kind of falls flat by your next encounter in Ecruteak City. Next is plot. And while the plot isn't terrible, it's not wholly bad, it's not that great either. While conceptually, and I've said this before multiple times for the video, conceptually, it's a very great idea. What happens to an organization like Team Rocket when their leader, this charismatic leader that held it all together, goes away? It doesn't actually go into much detail about that aspect. Like, how did Archer become the interim head of Team Rocket? And where did these admins come from? And are these Team Rocket grunts new? Are they returning members? It doesn't really touch on that. And so most of the good that we get from this Team Rocket is very conceptual. It's very based on the idea of this Team Rocket rather than the concrete plot, because they're largely not involved in this game at all. Like I mentioned during the plot summary, they are very scarce narratively throughout the game. There's only 2 large encounters with them before the 7th gym, and then after the 7th gym, it's already the climax, so you don't really run into them that often. The presence that you felt from Team Rocket's Kanto is just absent in the Johto region. So ultimately, I just wish there was more. I think that's what I can take away from Team Rocket and Johto's plot. I just wish there was more to it. I think a big example of this is the radio waves and their ability to make Pokemon evolve. I wish they did more with that. Rather than just having a side event with Mahogany Town, why don't you blend the two, the radio in Mahogany Town with the radio in Goldenrod City? I think one NPC said something about Team Rocket being able to affect evolution with the Goldenrod radio tower, but I wish they did something more. Like imagine, and this sounds like a fan game, but I don't really care. Like imagine, you know, where you might have to fight the trainers in Goldenrod City because the radio waves are making their Pokemon act up. Or maybe your Pokemon start to disobey you at times. Just make something interesting out of it, and that just doesn't happen. Like the final climactic event is just sort of a Mega Man style boss rush up to Archer, and it doesn't feel like there's much opposition. I honestly wish I could give this team a great or even an excellent score because of the premise, the concept of this desperate, leaderless Team Rocket team that is set up in these games, but unfortunately it falls flat narratively. So unfortunately, I give Team Rocket and Johto another mid score for their narrative, their plot. If you watched my last episode in this series, you know that I had a lot of good things to say about the aura of Team Rocket and Kanto. So how does Team Rocket and Johto stack up? Unfortunately, a lot of what made Team Rocket good in the Kanto games is absent from the Team Rocket in these games, namely being Giovanni and the loyalty of the grunts. Giovanni, like I mentioned earlier, is completely absent from the games besides that Celebi event, and isn't the leader of Team Rocket anymore. These new admins, while I think they're very cool from a design perspective, very unique, I love their designs. Unfortunately, they don't really have a lot of characterization to them, and they come off more weak rather than Giovanni, who's very strong and very serious, a very charismatic, like, he's him, you know? Further, the grunts are just less loyal now. Some aren't even in the loop of an operation that's going on, like in the radio tower, and some are even questioning what the admins are doing, like one of the grunts in Slowpoke Well. However, this is still Team Rocket. They've got the classic uniforms. It looks great. Those uniforms are great. However, it's not as congruent with the region they're in, as Kanto had that biker aesthetic that Team Rocket fit in with. That biker aesthetic isn't really here in Johto. They still kind of function like a mafia. However, I said it felt more corporate. So again, I wish I could give this team a higher score, and I was really looking forward to replaying Heart Gold and Soul Silver and seeing how awesome this new group of admins is once again. Like I remember them being when I was a kid. However, it just doesn't hold up, and I wish this wasn't the story for almost every metric, but I'm going to have to give Team Rocket's aura a mid score. While they maintain the swag and some of the aura they had in the previous games, it really just isn't there anymore. The admins, while they've got a cool design, like I said, they don't really have the characterization to make it work. So, now that I've rated this new Team Rocket, I've given them a score for all of them, where do I place them on the evil teams tier list? Well, unfortunately, I keep saying that word because that's how it is. I'm going to have to give them a C rating. They really had the potential to be up there with the Kanto Team Rocket. I really do believe they did, if they just leaned more into that concept of this being this aggressive, desperate, sort of feral animal Team Rocket that lost their charismatic leader and is just scraping by, clawing their way back, trying to reestablish themselves in the Pokemon world. But don't worry, this concept is touched on once more in the Pokemon series, and it's done very well the next time. So look forward to that. So overall, Johto Rocket didn't manage to do anything really horribly, terribly, nothing egregious. However, at the same time, they didn't manage to do anything really well either. So that'll be it for my analysis and retrospective on Team Rocket and their ventures in Johto. In the next episode, we will be going into the Generation 3 games in the Hoenn region and looking at the villainous teams you find there, those being Team Magma and Team Aqua. But until then, that's going to do it for me. Thank you so very much for watching once again. While you're here, make sure to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all the future videos I make. It's free and it helps out a ton. And don't forget to comment below your thoughts. I love to hear your thoughts, positive, negative. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what your favorite parts about this Team Rocket is, what your least favorite parts are. And don't forget to share this with all the Pokemon fans you know in your life, those who like to listen to these long form videos, they fall asleep to them, whatever. Just send it to everyone you know. But again, that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.